Hi, Tiffany. How are you?
Hi, Roxanne. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I'm so excited. We're kicking this off. I didn't realize we're the first, so
We
let's
are the
let's
first. Yes.
let's do it. Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, to reintroduce myself and who we are throughout the day, Tiffanie Petett, working at a company called Influential. We're a social data and conversion company specializing in showcasing the effectiveness of influencer campaigns by tracking things like attribution. Today's all about the metaverse. And so I love to kick this off with you, Roxanne, in telling us a little bit about your role as a whole. And I say this because the way in which that you might have started your role might have shifted and might continue to shift
Yeah.
as we shift more into this metaverse world. So talk a bit about your role, and then we'll get really deep into what you're doing in the metaverse.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Roxanne Iyer. I am joined Estee Lauder about 9 months ago. I'm the Vice President of Global Consumer Engagement, fairly new in the role. It's such an interesting time. If anyone's ever joined a new job at this time, I met my team for the first time a few weeks ago. And so it's just been an incredible journey at Estee Lauder. My role at Clinique is to present our brand and our products to consumers wherever they are. So because I lead consumer engagement across influencers, earned, owned, and paid media, a big part of my role is keeping a pulse on the market, keeping a pulse on our competitors, seeing where innovation leads us. Our kind of philosophy looking at consumer engagement is we track where consumers are, we see how consumers experiences are shifting externally, and the goal is to try and constantly evolve what we're doing internally. For anyone that's ever worked in marketing or digital, you know that that never comes to an end. So just when you think you have a pulse on something, there's something new that's launching, and you're constantly shifting. It's an interesting question, because where I started even 9 months ago, at this role at Estee Lauder and Clinique is so different than some of our priorities and our focus areas, even within the last few months.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, to hear such a company that's been around for so long, just continue to try to innovate. I want to say it's almost hourly at this point in trying to understand what's going on as platforms change and, everything kind of evolves in this space. Our POV is kind of like the metaverse is the next iteration for how we'll connect and experience the world around us in a blanket statement. Where does Clinique fit in that metaverse? I know there's a ton that you've done already. What
Yeah.
would you say is your POV?
Yeah. I think that no matter where we are in the physical or digital, our brand, goes deeper than skin and always has. Our purpose as a brand in general is to bring a daily dose of optimism for skin, for life. And so if you're a Clinique user, think about, or if you're not, if you've experienced our brand, if you think about the products that you love and that you use, dramatically different, the chubby stick, black honey that's going viral on TikTok right now. We have a fragrance that's just simply called Happy. And so, that I think is, that purpose and that brand purpose, whether you're in the physical or digital world, is, I think, how we see ourselves fitting into the metaverse. If we can be a part of bringing joy and optimism into the metaverse, just as we attempt to do in the physical world, I think that's where we'd like to see ourselves fitting, and that's where we're going to continue and test and learn in that space. um, I'm probably simplifying it, so if anyone in the audience feels differently, let me know. But the way that I think about it, and it's evolving, so I'm curious to hear how others are thinking about it. But it feels like there's kind of two ways in, and it's not either or. But to me, it's perhaps culture. How do you want to fit into culture? How do you want to be part of it? How do you want to drive it? And then the other, which is really interesting, and we haven't tested into, and we're eager to, is just revenue. Is this a new revenue stream for us? Is this a new way of seeing how we want consumers to engage with our brand? And perhaps at some point the two come together. But to me, we focus really heavily on the cultural part, which is, how does our brand show up in the metaverse? How do we make sure that we bring our consumers along with us on this journey? And so to me, the cultural part of it is really exciting, really hard to figure out how we continue to test and play. So we're doing it as thoughtfully as we can.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that because I mean, that's kind of a must to understand maybe the goals that you might have as a brand, but then also ways that you need to fit within the culture. Because I want to say, you know, things that were so innovative, like the internet way back when,
Yeah,
only, you know, maybe those looking to capitalize on it might have known
yeah,
like everything about it. Whereas consumers, we were just like, we're down, I guess. Like let's
yeah,
let's
yeah,
go forward. And now that we are just like inundated with information about this, everyone knows, right? And it's making it a lot more feasible and kind of leveling the playing field, if you will, for people to get involved
yeah,
immediately and educate themselves, right? So interesting to hear that you say that. It's necessary. I want to say, like, that's why you're here, to kind of like come from a reputable brand and show the way in which you're doing it. Because as an early adopter, there's no turning back at this point. We know it's
yeah,
happening. It's good to hear from you in that way. I want to talk specifically about the NFT and kind of how yours is different or Clinique's was different
yeah.
and the approach to that.
Yeah, you know, we spent a little bit of time looking at what was happening in the space, right? And so our NFT and our approach was intentionally different. I mean, there's it's so hard to compete with other categories that are spearheading the space, fashion, for example, and all that they've been doing, so incredible and so fun and exciting. So we saw a lot of things that were happening in the space when it comes to NFTs, real estate as NFTs, art pieces that were being auctioned, and then proceeds, you know, being put into good use. A purchase to entry. So you buy a product, you get an NFT or you get an experience. And so there were so many different ways in. We intentionally wanted to be different with ours. And so we were really interested and challenged with this idea of community. You know, if you remember the early days of social media, like how exciting to build a community on social media. The types of communities that can form in the metaverse are so different and so unique, and the brand ownership part of it is to me, I thought was really different, and a way to differentiate us from everything else that was going on in the space. Um, a big part of Clinique is who our consumer is. We have one of the most loyal consumers in the category, and our consumer base is so expansive, right? It's that girl or boy going to the store for the first time, and their first products, their first skincare or first makeup is Clinique, because of our promise on fragrance free and allergy tested, all the way up to our ageless consumers. So when you're a brand that has to talk meaningfully and engage meaningfully with consumers who are in their teens and all the way up to, you know, a 65-year-old, what we wanted to make sure was that we were really protective of our community. So our approach was, how do we get current consumers involved? And so our NFT was open to our consumer database, and we said, let's change the way that brands do loyalty today, you know, and let's start to modernize it. So we said, let's keep the barrier to entry really low, so that anyone who is part of the Clinique family can feel like it's not this innovation that is so hard to understand, or get into. We wanted to make sure that all barriers were it wasn't really hard to get into. So the first thing is, all you had to do was, you didn't have to buy anything, you just had to be part of the Clinique family. There was no purchase for our NFT. What we said was, we're a brand that brings joy and optimism to the world, and so the currency that we want is social storytelling. Tell us during the holiday season, as we're going through yet another lockdown for COVID, tell us what you do to bring joy and optimism to people around you, or tell us about people that are doing that for you. And so that's what we wanted to do. We said with our NFT, we wanted to be intentional about like bringing joy and optimism to the world. Like that was our intent. We wanted to continue to remain really high touch. So when you walk into a Clinique counter in the physical store, if you don't, if you interact with any of our consultants, this is derm level expertise that you can get at any counter around the world. It is really high touch. If you don't want to speak to a consultant, use any of our tools, and the experience that you will get is best in class. So we wanted to make sure that that high touch experience was relevant with our NFTs as well, in the physical and the digital world. So we had 3 winners. You could win an NFT. So 3 winners won an NFT, but they also won 10 years of Clinique products. So every year, these consumers call up our consultants. Our consultants will spend time understanding what they've gone through in life, what their, what their skin and their healthcare regime is, and we will then, give them, a number of products that are relevant to them. And we do that for every year for the next 10 years. So we wanted to make sure that our promise of being part of that consumer journey and being really high touch was still relevant. And I'd say the last thing that I think made us a bit more unique, I think a lot of brands are starting to do this, is we wanted to test and empower this idea of community. Our NFT was the Clinique molecule. And what we said is we are not assigning any value to it. Once you get it, it's completely yours. We don't make anything off it. You own a part of the Clinique molecule. It's yours to own, to trade, to sell. And so this concept of a community owning a part of the brand and how we exist in the metaverse, to us was challenging. Was different and a new way of thinking. But I think the most exciting part about our NFT process.
That so many questions came up in that, but first, like, what a way to get folks involved in something that might seem scary and, unknowing, to make it such a positive and joyful experience. Like, kudos to you, whoever, wouldn't sign up immediately. Like, I don't know these people. What a great way. And it's beauty at the end of the day. Like, that's amazing. You spoke about the NFT component in your last statement. How, and as that being a challenge, how was it getting the entire company involved in signing off on this idea?
Yeah, it was, it was interesting. I think with Clinique, it's been, a challenger brand and a leader and a leader in its category ever since it started over 50 years ago. There's always a sense of a sense of pride in being a leader and testing and doing things in a new way. We were the first brand at Estee Lauder to get into the NFT space, and so we were going ahead and we were kind of the first to test ahead of all of the brands that we have at the company. I think the most interesting thing that I got out of this was just the partnership from all of the teams that that is so critical. So of course, the marketing team, as a marketing team, we were aware of where consumers were. We knew how we wanted to target, certain groups of consumers. But to me, it was the power of a team that was led by our IT partners, our legal partners, our finance partners that took a risk and said, we're going to try to protect the brand as much as we can. And then there's so much unknown that we just have to test and learn. And so I think the partnership as a full company and a full team was really incredible. I'm not going to lie. I mean, with innovation like this, it's hard, right? Like, it's hard to make that business case because there is no business case. It hasn't been done before. But what I like to remind a lot of people, and there's a lot of just young people on the team that like to remind us back that if we don't lead, we're going to very quickly be left behind. I know when I speak to a lot of people, we talk about the early days of social media, right? Consumers were there, engagement was there, and brands took a little bit to catch up. If you took too long, and even, I mean, if you look at your competitive set today, if you haven't been on an as important a platform as social media, it might take you a decade to catch up with your competitor brands or to really lead in the category. And so there's always this window, which to me as a marketer is a gift. There's a window of opportunity where you get to test and learn and play in the space. And it can be so incredibly exciting and fun to just learn in a completely new space before, as you solidify your plans. So yeah, it was challenging. It was also exciting. And there were so many around the company that could see the vision, that were in the space, that had nieces or daughters or themselves were on Roblox, on Petett, on some of these platforms. They were buying land. They could see the price of digital real estate going up and were really just fascinated and wanted to get into it. So it was just kind of, if I had one word to describe it all, I'd say just excitement around the company, because the results that we're seeing and the payoff has been incredible, right? This was a US program that was picked up by almost 20 countries around the world. The lifts in search, the lifts in time spent with the brand, the engagement that we saw across all of our channels, is significant. Our brand ambassadors, so Emilia Clarke, Melissa Barrera, were so empowered by the stories they saw and the stories of optimism that came in. They jumped in to announce the winners. I mean, it was just like the results that we started to see were pretty significant. And sometimes when you're in innovation and you're testing and learning, you may not have that. Like the goal is to just learn, right? We were lucky that we were able to learn and get some of those really significant results as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like be scared. We're all scared, kind of. It's a lot of unknown, but if we don't go, like someone else will. And so we are here in this space, and we're supported by such a huge community. Why not give them an opportunity to be empowered? And it sounds like you did everything that you could do to check off the boxes in order to have proceeded in the way that you have. So again, congratulations thus far. I do want to talk a little bit about creative, and we have some questions from the audience that we'll tap into in just a bit. But tell me about creative, and does that process look a little bit different when we're thinking about the metaverse? Because it's so expansive, dare I say limitless.
Yeah.
What does that creative process look like for you?
Yeah, I think we started the creative process by looking at like who the consumer was, right? On most of these, it's primarily Gen Z. Like there's a reason why so much of this is taken off. And everyone knows that with every new generation that comes in, it's really hard to understand their values and understand what's important to them. This idea that experiences for Gen Z are far more important than any material objects is such a provoking thought. Because in order to engage with this audience on most of these platforms, if the experience isn't rich and engaging and best in class, you've kind of lost them already. We went through so many studies over the past few years, right? This idea of no ownership. We thought millennials were such an extraordinary generation because this idea of no ownership started, primarily with them, where only 35% of millennials felt like owning a home was important. With Gen Z, those numbers are so much lower. And so we knew that in order to engage with consumers, and listen, there's a long road ahead for us. But as we see other brands, it's amazing to see how important the creative process is in this. Ultimately, what you're selling is an experience, and the more engaging and real it is, the more powerful it can be. It's also interesting to work with creative teams because I think when we've spoken to creatives, over the past year or so, and you give them a brief that says create a brand experience, and you're taking elements from your stores, your counters, like things that you can understand in the physical world, because there's four walls and there's a limited amount of like just real estate that you work with in the physical world. And you tell a creative, like, there's no gravity, there's no physics, there's no walls, like create, like, I don't know, just like create whatever you want. Like, here's the brand promise, and start to just create. I think it's such a powerful brief to most creatives, because I think that you can get really fantastical in this world. I would say that's the most important part of it, is to allow consumers to imagine and to dream and to kind of experience things that they wouldn't normally do in a restricted physical world.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. To again have creative kind of come within the confines. I know a lot of people are working from home is already a challenge. To now think that, okay, cool, there's no confines, actually, like really take it, to the limits and see what we can do. That's inspiring. It makes me want to understand as well, what are you looking for in folks that you're hiring for your different teams? Are we making this a mandate? You must know something about the metaverse, or what are some of those skills that you're looking for, to leave it open for some folks that you're hiring?
Yeah, it's really hard to find talent that is experienced in the metaverse. I think, going back to who we are as a brand and what our culture is, right? Joy and optimism, and this need to lead, and to kind of lead our consumers through this journey. I think it's just, cultural fit is really critical. But people that are hungry, proactive, and really just want to learn, because I think the metaverse isn't about knowing it all. I know there's a question about like resources. How long does it take? I mean, it is, unless you're in it, it's like putting together a deck on TikTok. Unless you're in it and you're going down that rabbit hole and watching, 50 videos a day, I think that's when you start to get it. This is me speaking from personal experience, going down a TikTok rabbit hole. But you have to be on those platforms, and just a willingness to learn and explore, and watch what competitors are doing. So much of what we've been inspired by has been just other categories, just seeing how fast they've been moving, and how how far their imagination takes them has been really inspiring. So I'd say just like young talent that is hungry and proactive and willing to learn, but also willing to teach us, because there's so much learning that needs to happen across the org, I think is key.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, incredible. Couldn't agree more. I'm going to jump into some of these so we don't miss them. Someone's asking, with all this being new, how much self-study was required on your part? What kind of resources did you use? How long did it take for you to get it, quote unquote? Has it clicked? When did it click? Is it clicking? If I could add to that.
How long did it take to get it? Gosh, I mean, I feel like we're learning every day about the metaverse. To me, there was something that happened during COVID. Like it happened at a personal level with so many of us, right? I had never worked from home, which is kind of crazy. Like I just working from home just like wasn't, just not something that I personally ever did. Didn't think it could ever work. I attended a friend's wedding on Zoom. I had never had a Christmas party where I was having a party with friends and family that were all the way around the world, but also like 5 miles from my house. Like I attended the weekend concert on TikTok. I mean, virtual concerts and virtual events. There is so much that happened during COVID that was just surprising and new and different, right? I started to see certain brands in the fashion space that were starting to launch things almost every 3 or 4 weeks. So, if there's any brand that you follow, I mean, if you see what Gucci's been doing, launching every 3 or 4 weeks in the metaverse, Balenciaga, D&G, there's so many, Ralph Lauren, so many interesting brands that, were starting to make shifts and there was movement. We had employees who were talking about what their kids, their nieces, their sons and daughters were doing and how the world was changing. And especially during COVID, my nieces were connecting with their friends and their schoolmates who they hadn't seen in months on Roblox. And that was their learning platform. And so to me, those are the personal shifts that I think were starting to happen. We started to see avatars just take such a turn, right? Like, Nike and Ralph Lauren and Air Jordan launching on Snapchat and Bitmoji, and just like the spiral of that. So there was certainly like really big movements that happened before some of the big news hit, right? Beeple's art, and Jack Dorsey's first tweet, and all of those. And you kind of started to notice that these weren't, one-off exceptional headlines. Like Beeple selling a $69 million piece of art wasn't just a one-off headline. There was something there, and so I think that's how it started. It was really fun. We started to keep track of just digital real estate prices that were going up faster than in the physical world. And we started to notice brands starting to buy up blocks of land so that they could build for the future. I mean, there were just so many massive movements that were going on, and that continue to go on. So it's been a lot of learning, and it's going to continue to be learning in the months to come. Just a fun story. Yesterday, I met with a partner who was, talking to us about some of their experiences, and they all showed up. All of these, everyone on that team showed up in their digital avatars. Like I don't know what any of them look like. If I met them on the street, I wouldn't know. But it was so freaking cool. They were all in their digital avatars, and that's how they chose to express themselves, which I think is a really beautiful thing.
I am kicking myself. Why didn't we show up like that today?
I know.
That would have been the icing. Oh my goodness. You said so much, and I concur with you. Like, aside from kind of working in this space and hearing about it from an advertising and brand lens, there was several moments during the last couple of years where I just go on social, and social looks different.
Yeah.
My friends, like different friends from different walks of my personal life, and to know that everyone's sort of on board on this one thing that's definitely moving in that direction. It's kind of like, okay, you have to understand, like, you want to know why people are doing this and what this actually means.
Yeah.
So social, was a huge component of that. There's another question here. Sort of a statement, and then I'll go into the question. The reality is that increased adoption tends to take on a life of its own. NFTs are currently in the early stages of becoming a major part of our lives. Do you think big brands have a responsibility to educate their general audiences and customers on NFTs and the metaverse as they enter this new space? Or are you targeting a specific audience subset?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thanks, James. Um, I think we have a responsibility to our community. I can only speak on behalf of Clinique, because, like I was saying, we have one of the most loyal consumer databases. Our consumers have been with us for, in some cases, decades. In many cases, are starting with us for the first time. And that was our intent going into the NFT space, is we didn't want to do a buy this product and get it. We didn't want it to be a one-off moment. We wanted to make sure that, when we're talking about barriers to entry, how do we make sure that everyone can participate in it? We did a lot of work around on social, through our emails and CRMs, on site, to explain what they are, to encourage consumers, to like really talk to them about how easy it was to kind of go through that process. And so to us, we felt the responsibility to empower our consumers and not just get into this journey as a one-off moment. So I think that was really critical for us. So we took that on as a responsibility, which is why our launch was, the way it was. So yeah, I mean, to me, my answer would be, I think brands do have a responsibility. Now, there is a part of like, you can't please everyone, all audiences at all times, right? And so when we think about the creative experience and the platforms, we may not be able to address all ages and all categories. So to me, being authentic to that Gen Z consumer and making sure that the creative experience is as rich and engaging as it can be, understanding that they prioritize experiences over products, is really key when we think about engaging them. But anything that we do moving forward will continue to be focused on our loyal consumers. Will be continue to be focused on empowering them as they get into the space.
Yeah, and I'm sure that loyal consumer, there's such a broad spectrum, right? You have consumers of all shapes and sizes and knowledge bases and backgrounds and everything like that. So, I mean, what an exciting time to be kind of forced to take a really complicated, maybe scary, innovative subject and consolidate it into a way that is digestible. In helping empower. It's like the best form of education, if you ask me. Like, I've always been a fan of higher education if it's, in a way that's so, again, digestible, for lack of a better way to say it. I feel like that's really exciting.
Totally. And that's why we kept the price so high, right? I mean, 10 years of Clinique products, like we've never done that. Like that's a pretty significant investment from a brand perspective. And again, we were really intentional, which is we want to encourage consumers to feel like if they want to enter, it's really easy. They're already part of the Clinique family. So like right away, they're eligible. And we wanted them to feel like it is significant for you to want to be part of this. And so we've probably never done that significant a prize. But it was really important to us to say, listen, this is valuable. We want you to be part of this journey. And there's a really great reward for you as a consumer to continue to be part of the brand over time. So it's one of the reasons we also kept the prize and the win so high. I mean, 10 years of Clinique products, and you get to own our first NFT, but also part of the brand molecule was pretty significant for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about my skincare in the last 10 years in general. Like, I would love to have won that. That's amazing. Someone's asking, can you talk about Clinique's ties to celebrities versus influencers? And does one have a bigger impact over another?
I think we have so many tiers of influencers and the way we look at it. We have our celebrities. We have two global ones. There's a number of regional ones as well. There's influencers that we obviously work with really closely. Our consultants are one of our most impactful kind of influencer category. They are connecting and meeting and speaking with consumers in the store or on social media every day, different languages all around the world. We have hundreds of them. I'd say that has been the most important pillar for us. It's the core of the brand. It's where we started. It's where we continue to grow. And so I'd say that our consultants and the value they bring and the high touch experience that they bring is always going to be really critical. So I don't know if there's one versus the other, but I'd say all of them, all the way down to consumers who talk about our brand, love our brand, share our brand, and then pass it from their generation down is really critical to us. Back to the metaverse, we've been spending so much time, looking at partners that are bringing, digital avatars to life and trying to understand how do we negotiate or start to work with influencer or celebrity avatars. So if you follow Genies or you see some of the other work that, as Snapchat has done, it's really incredible to see a Chance the Rapper Bitmoji or Rihanna's Genies come to life and to see what they're doing in that space. But it's something that we've been keeping an eye on and is really exciting for us as well.
Yeah, I mean, ditto. We share the same excitement because at the end of the day, our go-to is that, these avatars, they still have audiences that are very, very real, as much as this might seem like a facade. So yeah, I agree with you in that statement.
Absolutely. And how hard is it in the physical world to meet an Emilia Clarke, right? Or to, she's on, like, celebrities are on shoots, they're shooting movies and they're really hard to get to. If I could, I would get all of our millions of consumers in a room with her to interact and engage. Can't do it in the physical world. I can absolutely do it in the digital world. And so this idea that we can bring people together and bring moments of joy and optimism, which is so critical to our brand, and we can do so many more of those moments in the metaverse is something that's really exciting for us.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have a question from someone. How do brands, and maybe you speak specifically on behalf of Clinique, how are they wrapping their heads around the new rules defined by Gen Z, like social constructs, like gender, reality, physicality?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. And it's something that we're going to continue to explore, right? I mean, one of the things that we've been looking at really thoughtfully is like, who do we partner with next? Like who represents our brand, and our brand is, in service of all skin, and that notion of diversity and great skin for all can be created. A big part of what we're doing, knowing that these are values that are important to us as a brand and really important to this Gen Z consumer, is, how do we pick partners that help us show up in the metaverse in that way? And so is it women-led? Is there enough diversity in some of the avatar platforms that we've been seeing? Do they truly represent all skin types, all skin issues, different types of men and women? That is really critical to us. And our next partnerships and whoever we work with has to be a real representation, because we know it's important to our consumer and important to Gen Z, which is really important, but really important to us as a brand. I love this idea of you decide how you show up. And so we're interested in testing out to see, like I said, on the call, in the meeting I had yesterday, no one showed up as their true selves, but they chose who they wanted to be, who they wanted. And I love that idea of freedom to show up as you want. There were bored apes, there were, non-binary, different skin types, different hairdos. And that freedom of expression, I think, is going to be critical and is so powerful in the metaverse. And so I know that we as a brand are certainly keen to be part of that.
I love that. I have a question you made me kind of think of as you think about your role in working with this and then Gen Z. How much of this metaverse speak makes it back to like your kitchen table, like your dining room table back home? Like, does this translate to like your family, like conversation? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it does, because I have two boys. My oldest son is 7 years old, so going on 8, and is starting to get into Roblox, and it's kind of interesting that I'm over his shoulder trying to see what he does. I have nieces that, like I said, interact with their friends on it, use it as a massive learning tool. So it's really incredible to see what's been happening in that space. But yeah, it's a big part of what we talk about. Some of the NFTs that I personally own, because there's, a whole movement for more NFTs owned by women, more power to women creators in the metaverse. Like, it's a big part of what I believe in personally. So there's a lot of that going on. So yeah, it's starting to become a big part of the conversation. I had friends who may not be on social, but kind of understand what's going on in this side of the world as well. I think it's starting to become a whole lot more mainstream than we think. I'm excited to see where hotels and airlines and like some of those categories go, where I don't know, every ticket's an NFT, your room reservation is one. I just think it's a matter of time before it starts to become such an everyday experience. So yeah, lots of conversations at home about this.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. Travel got me excited. I was like, I think I was excited when we started using like our wallet for boarding passes, like convenience, it's one less thing to think
Totally.
about.
Yeah, I know. So two things to get excited about. One, traveling again in a way that's
Exactly.
easy, hopefully. And then two, just like, let's see where NFTs go in the travel space.
Yeah. Does Clinique, I don't know how much you can share, but does Clinique have plans to offer another or create another NFT, or or get maybe their consumers involved in this? What does that look like in the near or
Yeah,
future?
that one's a bit hard to share, but I can say that we're certainly committed to it. And it's gonna continue to be a big part of our roadmap and our strategy to engage consumers. It's going to continue to be a space where we test and learn in. And I can say for sure that we're committed to being really thoughtful about how we continue to enter into the space. We may not have been, the very first one to do it, but I'd like to think that we did it thoughtfully. And so as we think about empowering men and women, being responsible for some of the diversity that we see in the metaverse, empowering our community and the communities that we work in, I think our commitments stay the same, and we're committed to continuing to do it as thoughtfully as we can.
Awesome answer. I'll take it. We'll all take it. Question for you on kind of a personal side. I consider you to be a early adopter of someone, interested in the metaverse from a professional level. And it seems like even personally, you have an affinity. Are there other examples in your life that you've been an early adopter of something more on the innovative side in our world?
Yeah. I've kind of been lucky to be surrounded by some really great people and teams. Most of the time it's, a 21-year-old who's just joined the team and is like, wants to tell the world about a new platform or a new way of doing things. There was so much that happened on TikTok, which, sounds like it was years ago at this point, but just, the innovation in social media, I think is a big one. I think some of the work, getting into avatars and previous roles, just getting onto some of the social platforms, testing social selling. There's a lot of work that, I've done, tested in, learned a whole lot of, failed with some, one with a few others, that I'm excited to continue doing. I think, with some of this innovation, it's important to find the leaders that are talking about it, thinking about it, and living and breathing it. And so I've always been inspired by like men and women that are doing that every day, and I follow them pretty actively. If you're ever interested in the metaverse, Kathy Hackle on LinkedIn is such a great voice to follow. But then there's a bunch of other brands that are doing really interesting things, and a lot of other publications that are starting to talk about it. And so just that awareness of like what people are talking about and listening to them. I'd say most of my learning has come from like amazing partners, like, agencies that are constantly reaching out, vendors that want to have a meeting to show you what they're doing, startups that like are run by one or two people that just like for a great idea and are looking for a partnership. To me, that's where so much of the inspiration comes from. And so I'm thankful that there are people that are so passionate, that are always eager to share.
No, 100%, Roxanne. I was inspired by you and seeing like what you're doing out there in the space. So thank you for joining us and educating
Thank
us and
you.
making it very, again, digestible. It's very important, and making sure like we all can just be a little bit smarter in going into this space. So thank you so much for
Thank
for
you.
being
Thank you for having me.
here.